Pan Tadeusz by Adam Mickiewicz. If you appreciate my work, leave a trace in the comments. Chapter 7. The Consultation Argument. Salutary counsels of Bartek, called the Prussian martial argument of Maciek the Sprinkler, political argument of Pan Buchmann, Jankiel advises harmony, which is cut off abruptly by the penknife, speech of Gerwazi, which makes apparent the great potency of parliamentary eloquence, protest of old Messiek. The sudden arrival of reinforcements interrupts the consultation. Down with the Soplica. It came the turn of the deputy Bartek to state his case. He was a man who often traveled with rafts to Königsberg. He was called the Prussian by the members of his family, in jest, for he hated the Prussians horribly, although he loved to talk of them. He was a man well advanced in years, who on his distant travels had learned much of the world. A diligent reader of gazettes, well versed in politics, he could cast no little light on the subject under discussion. Thus he concluded his speech. This is not, Pan Maciej, my brother, and revered father of us all. This is not aid to be despised. I should rely on the French in time of war as on four aces. They are a warlike people, and since the times of Thaddeus Kosciuszko, the world has not had such a military genius as the great Emperor Bonaparte. I remember when the French crossed the Warta. I was on a trip abroad at the time, in the year of our Lord 1806. I was just then doing some trading with Danzig, and, since I have many kinsmen in the district of Posen, I had gone to visit them. So it happened that Pan Joseph Grabowski and I, he is now colonel of a regiment, but at that time he was living in the country near Obiezierz, were out hunting small game together. In Great Poland there was then peace, as there is now in Lithuania. Suddenly the tidings spread abroad of a fearful battle. A messenger from Pan Todwin rushed up to us. Grabowski read the letter and cried, "Jana, Jana, the Prussians are smitten hip and thigh, victory." Dismounting from my horse, I immediately fell on my knees to thank the Lord God. We rode back to the city, as if on business, as if we knew nothing of the matter. There we saw that all the landraths, hofraths, commissioners, and all similar rubbish were bowing low to us. They all trembled and turned pale, like those cockroaches we call Prussians when one pours boiling water on them. Laughing and rubbing our hands, we asked humbly for news, and inquired what they had heard from Jena. Thereupon terror seized them. They were astonished that we already knew of that disaster. The Germans cried, "Ach, Herr Gott, away!" and, hanging their heads, they ran into their houses, and then pell-mell out of their houses again. Oh, that was a scramble! All the roads in Great Poland were full of fugitives. The Germans crawled along them like ants, dragging their carts, or rather wagons and drays, as the people call them there. Men and women, with pipes and coffee pots, were dragging boxes and feather beds. They scuttled off as best they could, but we quietly took counsel together. To horse! Let us harass the retreat of the Germans. Now we will give it to the landraths in the neck, cut chops from the hofraths, and catch the Herr officers by the queues. And now General Dombrowski entered the district of Posen and brought the orders of the Emperor to stir up an insurrection. In 1 week our people so whipped and banished the Prussians that you couldn't have found a German to make medicine of. What if we could turn the trick just as briskly and smartly now, and here in Lithuania give the Muscovites just such another sweating? Hey, what think you, Maciej? If Moscow picks a bone with Bonaparte, then he will make a war that will be no joke. He is the foremost hero in the world, and has armies unnumbered. Hey, what think you, Maciej, our father Bunny? He concluded. All awaited the verdict of Maciej. Maciej did not move his head or raise his eyes, but only struck himself several times on the side, as though he were feeling for his saber. Since the partition of the country he had worn no saber. However, from old habit, at the mention of a Muscovite, he always clapped his hand to his left side. He was evidently groping for his switch, and hence everybody called him Hand on Hip. Now he raised his head, and they listened in deep silence. Maciej disappointed the general expectation. He only frowned and again dropped his head on his breast. Finally he spoke out, pronouncing every word slowly and with emphasis, and nodding his head in time with them. Silence! Whence comes all this news? How far off are the French? Who is their leader? Have they already begun war with Moscow? Where and on what pretext? Which way are they going to move, and with what numbers are they comings? Have they a large force of infantry and cavalry? Whoever knows, let him tell. The crowd was silent, each man gazing at his neighbor. I should be glad, said the Prussian, to wait for the Bernardine Roback, for all the tidings come from him. Meanwhile we should send trusty spies across the border and quietly arm all the country round. But meanwhile we should conduct the whole matter with caution, in order not to betray our intentions to the Muscovites. Ha! Wait, prate, debate, interrupted another Mickiewicz, christened Sprinkler, from a great club that he called his sprinkling brush. He had it with him today. He stood behind it, rested both hands on the knob, and leaned his chin on his hands, crying, Delay, debate, hem, hum, haw, and then run away. I have never been in Prussia. Königsberg's sense is good for Prussia, but I have my plain gentleman's sense. This much I know. Whoever wants to fight, let him seize his sprinkling brush. Whoever prefers to die, let him call the priest. That's all. I want to live and fight. Of what use is the Bernardine? Are we schoolboys? What do I care for that Roback? Now we will all be Robacks, that is, worms, and proceed to gnaw at the Muscovites. Hem, haw, spies, to explore. Do you know what that means? Why, that you are impotent old beggars. Hey, brothers, it is a setter's work to follow a trail, a Bernardine's to gather alms, but my work is to sprinkle, 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 and that's all. Here he patted his club. After him the whole crowd of gentry yelled, Sprinkle, sprinkle. The side of Sprinkler was supported by Bartek, called Razor from his thin saber, and likewise by Mickiewicz, known as Bucket, from a blunderbuss that he carried, with a muzzle so broad that from it, as from a pail, 1,000 bullets poured in a stream. Both cried, Long live Sprinkler and his brush. The Prussian tried to speak, but he was drowned by uproar and laughter. Away, away with the Prussian cowards, they shouted. Let cowards go and hide in Bernardine cowls. Then once more old Mickiewicz slowly raised his head, and the tumult began somewhat to subside. Do not scoff at Roback, he said. I know him. He is a clever priest. That little worm has gnawed a larger nut than you. I have seen him but once, but as soon as I set eyes on him, I noticed what sort of bird he was. The monk turned away his eyes, fearing that I might summon him to confession. But that is not my affair. Of that there would be much to say. He will not come here. It would be vain to summon the Bernardine. If all this news came from him, then who knows what was his object, for he is the devil of a priest. If you know nothing more than this news, then why did you come here, and what do you want? War, they cried. What war? He asked. War with the Muscovites, they shouted. To fight! Down with the Muscovites! The Prussian kept shouting and raising his voice higher and higher, until he finally obtained a hearing, which he owed partly to his polite bows, and partly to his shrill and piercing tones. I too want to fight, he shouted, pounding his breast with his fist. Though I don't carry a sprinkling brush, yet with a pole from a river barge I once gave a good christening to 4 Prussians who tried to drown me in the Pragal when I was drunk. Good for you, Bartek, said Sprinkler. Good for you. Sprinkle, sprinkle. But in the name of the most dear Jesus, we must first know with whom the war is and about what. We must proclaim that to the world, shouted the Prussian, for what is going to make the people follow us? Where they are to go, and when and how, we do not know ourselves. Brother gentlemen, we need discretion. My friends, we need order and method. If you wish war, let us make a confederacy, and discuss where to form it and under whose leadership. That was the way in Great Poland. We saw the retreat of the Germans, and what did we do? We consulted secretly together. We armed both the gentry and a company of peasants, and, when we were ready, we waited Dombrowski's orders. At last, to horse. We rose as one man. I beg the floor, called out the manager of Kleck, a spruce young man, dressed in German costume. His name was Buchmann, but he was a Pole, born in Poland. It was not quite certain that he was of gentle birth, but of that they asked no questions, and everybody respected Buchmann, because he was in service with a great magnate, was a good patriot, and full of learning. From foreign books he had learned the art of farming, and conducted well the administration of his estate. On politics he had also formed wise opinions. He knew how to write beautifully and how to express himself with elegance. Therefore all became silent when he began to discourse. I beg the floor, he repeated. He twice cleared his throat, bowed, and with tuneful lips thus proceeded. My predecessors, in their eloquent speeches, have touched on all the principal and decisive points, and have raised the discussion to a higher plane. It only remains for me to unite into one focus the pertinent thoughts and considerations that have been put forward. I have the hope of thus reconciling contrary opinions. I have noted that the entire discussion consists of two parts. The division is already made, and that division I follow. First, why should we undertake an insurrection? In what spirit? That is the first vital question. The second concerns the revolutionary authority. The division is a proper one, only I wish to reverse it and begin with the authority. When once we understand the authority, from it I will deduce the nature, spirit, and aim of the insurrection. As for the authority, then, when I survey with my eyes the history of all humanity, what do I perceive therein? Why, that the human race, savage and scattered in forests, gathers together, collects, unites for common defense, and considers it. That is its first consultation. Then each lays aside a part of his own liberty for the common good. That is the first foundation, from which as from a spring flow all laws. We see then that government is created by agreement, and does not proceed, as men erroneously hold, from the will of God. Thus, since government rests upon the social contract, the division of power is only its necessary consequence. So there you are at contracts. Do you mean those of Kiev or of Minsk? Said old Maciej. You must mean the Babin government. Pan Bukman, whether God or the devil chose to cast the Tsar upon us, I will not dispute with your honor. Pan Bukman, tell us, please, how to cast off the Tsar. There's the rub, shouted Sprinkler. If I could only jump to the throne and with my brush, splash, once moisten the Tsar, then he wouldn't come back, either through the Kiev tract or the Minsk tract, or by any one of Bukman's contracts. The Russian priests would not revive him either by the power of God or by that of Beelzebub. The only brave way is to sprinkle. Pan Bukman, your speech was very eloquent, but eloquence is nothing but noise. Sprinkling is the principal thing. Good, 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 squealed Bartek the razor, rubbing his hands and running from Sprinkler to Maciej like a shuttle thrown from one side of the loom to the other. Only do you, Maciej of the Switch, and you, Maciej of the Club, make up your disagreement, and, so help me heaven, we will knock the Muscovites to splinters. Razor advances under the orders of Switch. Orders are good on parade, interrupted Sprinkler. We had a standing order in the Kauno Brigade, a short and pointed one. Strike terror and be not terrified. Fight and do not surrender. Advance always, and make quick strokes. Slish, slash. Those are my principles, squealed Razor. What's the use of spilling ink and drawing up acts of confederation? Do you want one? That's the whole question. Maciej is our marshal, and his little switch is his baton of office. Long live Cock on the Steeple, shouted Baptist. The gentry answered, Vivant the Sprinklers. But in the corners a murmur had arisen, though it was stifled in the center. Evidently the council was dividing into two sides. Bukman shouted, I will never approve an agreement. That's my system. Somebody else yelled, Veto, and others seconded him from the corners. Finally the gruff voice of Skoluba was heard, a gentleman from another hamlet. What is this, my friends of the Dobzhinsky family? What does all this mean? How about us? Shall we be deprived of our rights? When we were invited from our hamlet, and the warden, my boy Rimbailo, invited us, we were told that great things were to be done, that the question did not affect the Dobzhinskys alone, but the whole district, the entire gentry. Roback mumbled the same thing, though he never finished his talk and always stammered and expressed himself obscurely. Well, finally we have gathered, and have called in our neighbors by messengers. You Dobrinskys are not the only men here. From various other hamlets there are about 200 of us here. So let us all consult together. If we need a marshal, let us all vote with an equal voice for each. Long live equality. Then 2 Tarayeviches and 4 Stipolkowskis and 3 Mickiewiczes shouted, Vivat equality, taking the side of Skoluba. Meanwhile Buchman was crying, Agreement will be our ruin. Sprinkler yelled, We can get along alone without you. Long live our marshal, the Maciej of Maciejs. Let him have the baton. The Dobzhinskys cried, We beg you to take it, but the rest of the gentry shouted with one voice, We forbid it. The throng was breaking up into 2 groups, and nodding their heads in contrary directions, one faction cried, We forbid, and the other, We beg you. Old Maciej sat in their midst, the one dumb man. and his head alone was unmoved. Opposite him stood Baptist, resting his hands on his club, and, moving his head, which was supported on the end of the club, like a pumpkin stuck on the end of a long pole, he nodded it, now forward and now backward, and cried incessantly, "Sprinkle, sprinkle!" Up and down the room the mobile razor ran constantly from Sprinkler to Maciej's bench, but Bucket slowly walked across the room from the Dobrzynskis to the other gentry, as if he were trying to reconcile them. One shouted continually, "Shave," and the other, "Pour." Maciej held his peace, but he was evidently beginning to be angry. For a quarter of an hour the uproar seethed, when above the bawling crowd, out of the throng of heads, there leapt aloft a shining pillar. This was a sword 2 yards long and a whole palm broad, sharp on both edges. Evidently it was a German sword, forged of Nuremberg steel. All gazed at the weapon in silence. Who had raised it up? They could not see, but at once they guessed. "That is the penknife! Long live the penknife!" they shouted. "Vivat the penknife, the jewel of Rimbajlo hamlet! Vivat Rimbajlo, Nachi, half-goat, my boy!" At once Gerwazi, for it was he, pressed through the crowd into the middle of the room, carrying his flashing penknife. Then, lowering the point before Maciej as a sign of greeting, he said, "The penknife bows to the switch. Brothers, gentlemen of Dobrzyn, I will give you no advice. Not at all. I will only tell you why I have assembled you. But what to do and how to do it, decide for yourselves. You know the rumor has long been current among the hamlets that great things are preparing in the world. Father Roback has been talking of this. Do not you all know this?" "We know it," they shouted. "Well, so for a wise head," continued the orator, looking sharply at them, "2 words are enough. Is not that true?" "It is," they said. "Since the French emperor is coming from one direction," said the warden, "and the Russian Tsar from the other, there will be war. The Tsar and the emperor, kings and kings, will start to pummel one another as monarchs usually do. And shall we sit quiet? When the great begin to choke the great, let us choke the smaller, each his own man. When we set to smiting above and below, great men great ones, and small men small ones, then all the rascals will be overthrown, and thus happiness in the Polish Commonwealth will bloom again. Is not this so?" "As true as if you were reading it out of a book," they said. "It is true," repeated Baptist, "drop after drop, every bit." "I am always ready to shave," exclaimed Razor. "Only make an agreement," courteously begged Bucket, "under whose leadership Baptist and Maciej shall proceed." But Bookman interrupted him. "Let fools agree. Discussions do not harm the common weal. I beg you to be silent. We are listening. The case gains thereby. The warden is considering it from a new point of view." "Not at all," shouted the warden. "I follow the old fashion. Of great things great men should think. For them there is an emperor, and there will be a king, a senate, and deputies. Such things, my boy, are done in Krakow or in Warsaw, not here among us, in the hamlet of Dobrzyn. Acts of confederation are not written on a chimney with chalk, nor on a river barge, but on parchment. It is not for us to write such acts. Poland has the secretaries of the kingdom and of Lithuania. Such was the ancient custom. My business is to whittle with my penknife." "To sprinkle with my brush," added Sprinkler. "And to bore with my awl," cried Bartek the awl, drawing his sword. "I summon you all to witness," concluded the warden. "Did not Roback tell you that before you received Napoleon into your house you should sweep out the dirt? You all heard it, but do you understand? Who is the dirt of the district? Who traitorously killed the best of Poles? Who robbed and plundered him? Who? Must I tell you?" "Why, it is Soplica," interrupted Bucket. "And now he even wants to snatch the remnants from the hands of the heir. He is a scoundrel." "Oh, he is a tyrant," squealed Razor. "Then sprinkle him," added Baptist. "If he is a traitor," said Bookman, "to the gallows with him." "Hurrah!" they all cried. "Down with Soplica!" But the Prussian ventured to undertake the defense of the judge, and cried with arms held up towards the gentry, "Brother gentlemen, oh, oh, by God's wounds, what means this? Warden, are you mad? Was it this we were discussing? Because a man had a crazy outlaw brother, shall we punish him on his brother's account? That is a Christian way of doing things. The Count is behind all this. As for the judges being hard on the gentry, that is not true, in heaven's name. Why, it is you who summon him to court, but he always seeks a peaceful settlement with you. He yields his rights and even pays the costs. He has a lawsuit with the Count, but what of that? Both are rich. Let magnate fight magnate. What do we people care? The judge a tyrant. He was the first to forbid that the peasants should bow low before him, saying that that was a sin. Often a company of peasants, I have seen this myself, sit at table with him. He has paid the taxes for the village, and it is quite different at Kleck, though there, Pan Buchmann, you run things in German fashion. The judge, a traitor. I have known him since we were in the primary school. As a lad he was honest, and today he is the same. He loves Poland above everything. He keeps up Polish customs. He will not yield to Muscovite fashions. Whenever I return from Prussia and want to wash off the German taint, I drop in at Soplicowo, as the center of Polish ways. There a man drinks and breathes his country. In God's name, brothers Dobzhinsky, I am one of you, but I will not let the judge be wronged. Nothing will come of that. It was not thus in Great Poland, brothers. What a spirit, what harmony! It is pleasant to remember it. There no one dared to interrupt our councils with such a trifle. It is no trifle to hang scoundrels, shouted the warden. The murmur was increasing. Suddenly Jankiel asked a hearing, jumped on a bench, took his stand on it, and thus raised above their heads a beard like a tavern bush, which hung down to his belt. With his right hand he slowly took from his head his foxskin hat. With his left he adjusted his disordered skull-cap. Then he tucked his right hand in his girdle and spoke thus, bowing low to all with his foxskin hat. Well, gentlemen of Dobzhin, I am nothing but a Jew. The judge is no kith or kin of mine. I respect the Soplicas as very good gentlemen and my landlords. I respect also the Bartek and Maciej Dobzhinskis as good neighbors and my benefactors. But I say thus, if you want to do violence to the judge, that is very bad. Some of you may get hurt and be killed. But how about the assessors, and the police captain, and the prison? For in the village near Soplica's house there are heaps of soldiers, all Jaegers. The assessor is at the house. He need only whistle, and they will march right up and stand there ready for action. And what will happen then? But if you are expecting the French, why the French are still far off, a long road. I'm a Jew and know nothing of war, but I have been in Bielica, where I met Jews straight from the boundary. The report is that the French were stationed on the river Losasna, and that if there is to be war, it will not come till spring. Well, I tell you, wait, the farm of Soplicowo is not a fair booth that is taken apart, put in a wagon, and carried off. The farm will stand as it is until spring. And the judge is no Jew in a rented tavern. He won't run away, you can find him in the spring. But now pray disperse, and don't speak aloud of what has occurred, for to talk of it will do no good. And I beg you all, kind gentlemen, follow me. My Sarah has given birth to a little Jankiel, and today I treat the crowd, and the music is splendid. I will order bagpipes, a bass viol, and 2 fiddles, and Pan Maciek, my friend, likes old July mead and a new mazurka. I have new mazurkas, and I have taught my kids to sing just fine. The eloquence of the universally beloved Jankiel touched the hearts of his hearers. There arose cries and exclamations of joy. The murmur of approbation was even spreading beyond the house when Gerwazi aimed his penknife at Jankiel. The Jew jumped down and disappeared in the crowd. The warden shouted, "Begone, Jew! Don't stick your fingers into the door. This is not your business. Prussian, because you, sir, conduct your trading with the judge's pair of miserable boats. Are you shouting for him? Have you forgotten, my boy, that your respected father used to make the trip to Prussia with 20 Horeszkos boats? Thence he and his family grew rich. Yes, and every one of you that are living here in Dobrin, for you old men remember, and you young men have heard, that the Pantler was the father and benefactor of you all. Whom did he send as manager to his Pinsk estates? A Dobzhinsky. Who were his accountants? Dobzhinskis. He chose none for majordomos and none for butlers, except Dobzhinskis. His house was full of Dobzhinskis. He pressed your cases before the courts. He gained pensions for you from the king. He put your children by droves in the Piarist schools and paid for their clothes, board, and lodging. When they grew up, he even got places for them, also at his own expense. Why did he do this? Because he was your neighbor. Today Soplica's landmarks touch your borders. What good has he ever done you? Not a bit, interrupted Bucket, for he is an upstart that rose from being a petty landholder. But how haughtily he blows out his cheeks, pooh, 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 how high he holds his head. You remember, I invited him to my daughter's wedding. I offered him drink, but he wouldn't take it. He said, "I don't drink as much as you gentry. You gentry swill like bitterns." What a magnate, a milksop made of pastry flour. He wouldn't drink, so we poured it down his throat. He cried, "This is an act of violence." "Just wait, I'll pour it into him out of my bucket." "The knave!" exclaimed Baptist. "I'll just sprinkle him on my own account. My son used to be a clever lad. Now he's turned so stupid that they call him Buzzard, and he has become such a ninny all because of the judge. I said to him once, 'What do you run off to Soplicowo for? If I catch you there, God help you!' Immediately he slunk off to Zozia again and stole through the hemp. I caught him and then took him by the ears and sprinkled him. But he blubbered and blubbered like a peasant's baby. 'Father, you may kill me, but I must go there.' And he kept on sobbing. 'What's the matter with you?' I asked, and he told me that he was in love with Zozia and wanted to have a look at her. I felt sorry for the poor lad and said to the judge, 'Judge, give me Zozia for Buzzard.' 'She is still too young,' he answered. 'Wait about 3 years and then she may do as she likes.' The scoundrel! He lies. He's already arranging another match for her. I have heard of it. Just let me screw myself in there at the wedding, and I'll bless their marriage bed with my sprinkler." "And shall such a scoundrel hold sway," cried the warden, "and ruin ancient magnates, better men than he? And shall both the memory and the name of the Horeszkos perish? Where is their gratitude in the world? There is none in Dobrin. Brothers, do you wish to wage war with the Russian Emperor, and yet do you fear a battle with Soplicowo farm? Are you afraid of prison? Do I summon you to brigandage? God forbid. Gentlemen and brothers, I stand on my rights. Why, the Count has won several times and has obtained no few decrees. The only trouble is to execute them. This was the ancient custom. The court wrote the decree, and the gentry carried it out, and especially the Dobrinskis, and thence grew your fame in Lithuania. Yes, at the foray of Mish the Dobrzynskis alone fought with the Muscovites, who were led by the Russian general Voinilovich, and that scoundrel, his friend, Pan Wolk of Logomowice. You remember how we took Wolk captive, and how we were going to hang him to a beam in the barn, because he was a tyrant to the peasantry and a servant of the Muscovites. But the stupid peasants took pity on him. I must roast him some time on this penknife. I will not mention countless other great forays, from which we always emerged as befitted gentlemen, both with profit and with general applause and glory. Why should I remind you of this? Today the Count, your neighbor, carries on his lawsuit and gains decrees in vain, for not one of you is willing to aid the poor orphan. The heir of that pantler who nourished hundreds, today has no friend except me, his warden, and except this faithful penknife of mine. "And my brush," said Sprinkler. "Where you go, dear Jerwozy, there will I go too, while I have a hand and while this splish-splash is in my hands. Two are a pair. In heaven's name, my Jerwozy, you have your sword, I have my sprinkling brush. In heaven's name I will sprinkle, and do you strike, and thus slish and slash, splish and splash, let others prate." "But, my brothers," said Razor, "you will not exclude Bartek. All that you may soap I will shave." "I too prefer to move on with you," added Bucket, "since I cannot make them agree on the choice of a marshal. What care I for votes and balls for voting? I have other balls." Here he took from his pocket a handful of bullets and rattled them. "Here are balls," he cried. "All these balls are for the judge." "We will join you," shouted Skoluba. "Indeed we will." "Where you go," cried all the gentry. "Where you go, there will we go also. Long live the Horeszkos! Vivant the half-goats! Vivat the warden Rembajlo! Down with the Soplica!" And thus the eloquent Gerwazi carried them all away, for all had their grudges against the judge, as is usual among neighbors. Now complaints of damage done by cattle, now for the cutting of wood, now squabbles over boundary lines. Some were aroused by anger, others merely by envy for the wealth of the judge. All were united by hatred. They crowded about the warden and raised aloft sabers and sticks. At last Masiek, hitherto sullen and motionless, rose from his bench and with slow steps came out into the middle of the room and put his hands on his hips. Looking straight before him and nodding his head, he began to speak, pronouncing slowly every word, pausing between them and emphasizing them. "O stupid, stupid idiots! Whoever dances, you will pay the piper." So long as the discussion was over the resurrection of Poland and had to do with the public will, Idiots, all this time you quarreled. It was impossible, idiots, either to debate, idiots, or to get order among you, or to put a leader over you, idiots. But let anyone raise his private grudges, idiots, then straightway you agree. Get out of here, for as my name is Mickiewicz, I wish you to millions, hundreds of thousands of wagons, of hogsheds, of drays of devils. All were hushed as if struck by lightning. But at the same moment a terrible shouting arose outside the house. Vivat the Count! He was riding into Machiewicz' yard, armed himself, and followed by 10 armed jockeys. The Count was mounted on a mettled steed and dressed in black garments. Over them a nut-brown cloak of Italian cut, broad and without sleeves, and fastened at the neck with a buckle, fell from his shoulders like a great shroud. He wore a round hat with a feather, and carried a sword in his hand. He wheeled about and saluted the throng with the sword. "Vivat the Count!" they cried. "We will live and die with him." The gentry began to gaze out of the cottage through the windows, and to press continually towards the door behind the warden. The warden went out, and behind him the crowd tumbled through the door. Mickiewicz drove out the remnant, shut the door, bolted it, and looking out through the window, said once more, "Idiots!" But meanwhile the gentry had rallied to the Count. They went to the tavern. Gerwazy called to mind the days of old, and bade them give him 3 Polish girdles, by means of which he drew from the vaults of the tavern 3 casks, one of mead, the second of brandy, and the third of beer. He took out the spigots, and immediately 3 streamlets spurted forth, gurgling, one white as silver, the second red as carnelian, the third yellow. With a triple rainbow they played on high. They fell in 100 cups and hummed in 100 glasses. The gentry ran riot. Some drank, others wished 100 years to the Count, all shouted, "Down with the Soplica!" Jankiel rode off on horseback, silently, without saddle. The Prussian likewise, unheard, though he still discoursed eloquently, tried to slip away. The gentry chased him, crying that he was a traitor. Mickiewicz stood apart, at some distance, without either shouting or giving counsel, but from his air they perceived that he was plotting something evil. So they drew their blades, and at the shout of "Down with him," he retreated and defended himself. He was already wounded and leaning on the fence when Zan and the 3 Czechots sprang to his aid. After this the men were separated, but in that scuffle 2 had been wounded in the hand, and 1 had got cut over the ear. The rest were mounting their horses. The Count and Gerwazy marshaled them and distributed arms and orders. At last all started at a gallop down the long street of the hamlet, crying, "Down with the Soplica!"
Remember to subscribe.